Get 15% off a set of BrakeMess Select, Select Pro, or Import Direct brake pads and 2 rotors now at O'Reilly Auto Parts.
O'Reilly Auto Parts.
Welcome to the 7220sports.com kickoff show presented by Wild Lotto and Rocky Mountain Shirtworks.
We're all embarrassed by what happened. You know, look, I love the University of Wyoming. I love our fans. I love everything. I apologize to every single one of them for what we did Saturday night. And we're going to do everything we can to never make sure that that ever happens again. But in the moment when you're sitting there trying to figure out, okay, how are we stopping this from happening? You know, when you're not able to string together something momentum-wise offensively and you're not making enough plays to get off the field defensively, and you throw in 2 touchdowns that you give up on offense, it creates an avalanche, and we weren't able to get out of it.
Jared Newland, I appreciate the apology from Jay Sawvell. It was warranted. It was one of, I mentioned it on a show earlier this week, I think I've been to damn near 300 Wyoming games in my lifetime in 40 years on this planet. Top 3. I'm confident in saying top 3 worst game I've ever witnessed in my life happened at Arizona State University 7 days ago.
I would be right up there with you. I mean, I did live and breathe the Vic Koenig era, but I guess we give that a pass now. Last year's Boise State game was one of the more disappointing games that I think we've witnessed as well in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Probably top 5.
No question.
And maybe not top 3, but top 5. And the only thing that was missing from Jay's press conference bit that you just heard there were a bunch of beeps.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
You think that, I mean, I'm sure he was Saturday in the locker room, halftime and postgame, but at the same time, you got to wear it on your sleeve.
I got to tell you, it was disheartening to be on the sideline with 8 minutes to go in the fourth. It really was. I didn't see any helmets thrown. I didn't see anybody doing anything. I saw players talking to people in the crowd. The crowd, by the way, chanting fire Jay Sawvell right in the front row, right next to Jay's daughter. It was ugly in every sense of the word, but I didn't see any emotion. Like, nobody was pissed off. Nobody was freaking out. And I was able to ask Jay, not in front of everybody, but I was able to ask him on a personal note earlier in the week why that is, why the fight wasn't there, why there was no emotion post-game. And he said flat out, we were shell-shocked. We were just shell-shocked. The whole group was, after giving up a touchdown 41 seconds into that game. And then the way the second, I don't think anybody's put enough credit into Wyoming's second drive where they're moving the ball and they get past the 50 and then just literally rip a gun out of their holster and blow every toe off, throw another pick. Then Arizona State adds a field goal, and then the avalanche had begun. And he said they just couldn't recover. And that's the excuse I heard from Jay Johnson. I heard from Evan Svoboda this week, Jordan Bertinoli, Jack Walsh, all of them. Just stunned. We got stunned. We got punched in the face, stunned, couldn't do anything about it.
The one positive is it's a non-conference game, and it's the first game of the year. You have 11 more games to right the ship. We've seen it before where Wyoming comes out and doesn't play well or up to expectations, and then they do right the ship. I mean, we'll see today because this, you said it right, this goes from a chalk it up as a win to a must-win.
Must-win. I would argue, obviously, today the Wyoming Cowboys will open their they'll play their 400th game inside War Memorial Stadium today. 128th year of Wyoming Cowboys football taking on the Idaho Vandals. 1:30 p.m. Mountain Time. The game will be on True TV. Also, you can stream it on Max. Also, you can just keep it right here and listen here on KWB. I would argue today, Jared, that not only do they need to win, it needs to be dominating. It needs to be dominating on all sides of the ball.
I hear you, and I know where that's coming from. At this point, I'll take a 17-16 victory.
Oh, my God.
Just a win is a win.
Imagine how everybody be feeling if it's 17-16 victory. I think it'd be feeling a lot like that Montana State game a couple years ago that took a last-second touchdown to pull out of the fire, and everybody went, uh-oh.
I agree, but they still went on to win a lot of games that year and went to a bowl game. So I mean, they have to right the ship with a W first.
Yes.
No matter how they can get it.
Yeah.
Grinding one out might be better than a blowout, to be honest with you.
Could be, yeah.
Mentally.
Could be. I just imagine the talk around everything if they eke one out against Idaho.
The sky's already falling. I mean, the comments I've heard this week are just absolutely ridiculous.
Pain.
Not only at the stadium last Saturday in Tempe, but just all week long from people. I'm like, did you guys actually watch the game?
No.
I mean, you may have heard what happened, but I don't know if you actually watched the game.
Man, it's been pure pain, and I hate to sound like a baby, but good Lord. The vitriol on social media has been insane.
Oh, yeah. And
Jay Savell obviously getting a death threat this week. I mean, which I saw with my own eyes. Somebody obviously very impaired who doesn't know how to spell. We'll put it that way right off the bat. But just an all-around dumpster fire. Just you almost want to just burn that one and say forget it. I think where you were going earlier, we both are under agreement that 2 years ago, Andrew Peasley comes in. There's a help wanted ad put on social media, just a couple months before that. Here comes Andrew Peasley from a rival at Utah State, 5 for 20 for 30 yards and a pick in an absolute beatdown at Illinois. And I think the sky's falling then, and people are going, oh my God, Andrew Peasley is awful. This passing game has never been worse. He gets off Twitter completely. He totally focuses and hones in on what he's doing. He turns around. He's the Mountain West Offensive Player of the Week 1 week later.
In a great game against Tulsa.
Yep.
I mean, it was an exciting game to watch. So hopefully we'll see something similar to that today or even better than that today. But I guess the good thing is that Wyoming football has expectations now.
Yeah, no doubt.
And where people care.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes you might be a little over the top on caring, like with a death threat for crying out loud or calling people out after one game. I mean, there's a lot of things that can still happen in 11 games. So let's let the season play out, not one game play out. But I like the fact that Wyoming football has expectations.
Yeah, and you put a positive spin on it, and I've tried to do that as well. I've seen colleagues of mine, for instance, who cover the New Mexico Lobos, who do an hour-long post-game show on Twitter, and not one question's asked, and nobody cares. I see the same at Utah State. I see the same at Hawaii, and there are some good fans at every institution in this conference. But as a whole, to me, it's a no-brainer. Wyoming has the best fans, the most passionate fans, the most over-the-top at time fans.
And the most invested interest.
Invested, no question.
Yep.
Because, I mean, you want to get down to it, our tax dollars are invested.
Absolutely. And it's Wyoming's pro sports franchise.
Yeah.
That is what it is. And I think it's great that we have expectations that Wyoming is competing for conference championships in football.
No question. A lot of this venom being spewed at number 17 under center, Jared.
But why is he wearing that number?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. I want to get your thoughts on how, if you think it's fair or not, what Evan's getting from everyone, from all corners. I mean, it was all bad. It was all bad. He was bad. Everyone was bad.
I view it as a perfect storm. He is nervous as all get out in front of his family, his friends in his home city, and just the play call on second down. I go back to it. I don't know if you call it out there.
Yeah.
I think, in my opinion, you want to establish a run a little bit. See if you can get those guys moving off the ball.
Boy, they went to the perimeter a lot, didn't they? Even in the run game, just punch them in the mouth.
Yeah. And that is not what Wyoming football has been the last 10 years.
No.
Especially the last 8 years.
No.
You line up and smack them in the mouth.
No.
And there's a reason that Texas's D-line said that Wyoming's offensive line was the best they faced last year.
Yeah.
Because they were tough, hard-nosed, smash-mouth football.
Yeah.
And we did not see that on Saturday night.
No. Arizona State took the fight to Wyoming on Saturday night, and that was, I think, one of the most disheartening parts of walking out of Mountain America Stadium was Wyoming looked, I wrote about it this week, they looked like the nerd at your local bar who was wearing a tap-out shirt and ripped jeans who, has a loud mouth with his affliction shirt on and has a glass jaw. I mean, and the Cowboys have never been that, and that was hard to take.
I mean, it might end up being a good thing that happened. If they can right the ship today.
Yeah.
They can't come out and lay another egg. Then
oh man.
I mean,
then the sky might actually be falling.
Then you have BYU coming to town.
Yeah.
Then you have to go on the road. Then you have Air Force coming to town. It's
must.
Ooh.
It's a must win. Evan Svoboda, 6 of 15, 42 yards. Those two aforementioned picks that happened on the first two drives. The first one, of course, returned for a 29-yard touchdown. Arizona State up 7-0 early. I had the chance to talk to Evan Svoboda this week. I asked him bluntly what happened.
Not stiff or wound up, just kind of being back in the home state. I would say a little bit of pressure. Yep. Just a pressure to perform and just really go out and perform well. Yep. I think that was kind of in the back of my mind. Now, obviously, I'm always poised, and I can always, short-term memory and just kind of lose it and, next play. But I think just a little bit of pressure.
I give the kid credit, Jared. He said as much. He admitted that he had a lot of pressure playing in his hometown. He's, of course, a Mesa product, less than 10 miles away from Tempe. I kind of questioned after the game. He was very we need to flush it. Didn't take a lot of responsibility, I felt, when I left the initial press conference after the game. Monday, one-on-one, this is more of what you got, is more of, I had a rough one. I think I felt too much pressure playing at home. I even said, hey, let me play devil's advocate here. You started a game last year in front of 100,000 people against a playoff team in Austin, Texas, and you looked way more comfortable. In my opinion, Jared, and I asked Evan this straight up, told Evan this straight up, I watched the game, rewatched the game right before I went over to do interviews Monday. I said, you looked tight, you looked indecisive, you didn't look like you were playing football, you didn't look comfortable at all. And maybe to add to that was Sam Leavitt looking ultimately comfortable. He looked incredible. That was his first collegiate start against Wyoming, Arizona State's quarterback, who, oh, by the way, Jay Johnson recruited to play at Michigan State. He moved around the pocket. He gashed the Cowboys with so many quarterback runs. He extended plays. He made throws. He looked like he was playing backyard football, and Evan looked like a statue, in my opinion.
And the speed was, it's
night and day.
It was undeniable.
Yeah.
And the way that those 40 transfers, we talked about a week ago and really in the offseason, there was no identity for Arizona State football.
No.
Because of the 30-some transfers a year before and the high 30s this last year or low 40s, whatever it was. Nobody knew who they had. We don't even know if they as a coaching staff knew what they had.
I don't think so.
Well, they do now.
Yeah. They got a good team.
Yes. And they're taking on Mississippi State today, and they have a chance to smack a SEC team in the mouth.
No doubt. And I think they will. We keep going back to that Illinois game. I think that there are a lot of similarities. We went into that year going, Illinois' bottom of the barrel Big Ten. If Wyoming's ever going to go on the road and beat a Big Ten team, this is it. This is the type of team to do it against. That team ended up winning 8 games. 3 of their defensive backs were drafted, including, number 4 overall in the NFL draft? They ended up being pretty damn good, and I would put a shiny new nickel on the fact that we're going to be saying the same thing about Arizona State here in 3 months.
I totally agree with you there.
More on the quarterback, talk to Jack Walsh, the right guard. Obviously, he said just a horrible day at the office all around. I asked him specifically about his quarterback, including the death threats. And, Jay Sauvel mentioned him, offensive coordinator Jay Johnson, and Evan Svoboda. Those are the lightning rods this week for the fan base. So here's what Jack Walsh had to say about his quarterback.
The nature of college football, I think, is really just kind of on a whole different level from other sports. I don't know what it is, but I texted Evan yesterday. I told you I love you, brother, man. You're a hell of a quarterback. You were born for this. And you just... It's hard to block it out. There's so many people that say stuff, but what they say does not matter. They don't. There's a reason they're in the stands. We're on the field. It's not easy hearing those things, especially a death threat. That's on a whole nother instrumental level than saying you suck.
Right.
It is what it is. That's just people say things like that, and you kind of just gotta block it out best you can. It's hard for the human brain to try to just flush something like that, but he's a hell of a competitor, and he'll be just fine.
I think that's all you can do right now is just say, hey, man, I love you. We're here for you. Jay Sauvel mentioned, hey, man, you can listen to that outside noise if you want to, but the people who believe in you are in this building. And that's who you should be listening to. And I said it all week, Jared, and I'm sure you thought the same thing. Please tell me these guys aren't on social media this week, because it was nothing short of gross.
Yeah, I haven't seen much from any of them, that's for sure.
Yeah.
As far as, liking or commenting or anything. I don't follow every single one of them, but I just hope the coaching staff needs to stay away from it too.
Yeah.
Focus on the task at hand and right the ship today.
It's pure poison. I thought this was a really telling comment by Jay Sawvell when talking about Evan Svoboda. You ask the question and you get the eye rolls and the snickers, and I get it. Do you still have faith in your quarterback? Do you still believe in your quarterback even though it's only one game in? It was that bad. However, TK King dropped what was surely, if not a touchdown, a huge gainer. He had a ball right in the number, 3 blockers in front of him, 1 Arizona State defender, and a lot of green grass. That also could have turned the game. It was only 17-7 at that point. It was the first play of the second quarter. He dropped that one. Then TK King's involved in a play that I thought just kind of embodied this entire nightmare, which was the lateral pass. It was a terrible pass, but he touched it, and he stopped and didn't jump on the ball. And a guy who we actually saw with my own eyes in pregame talking smack to Evan Svoboda in the end zone scoops and scores to add salt to the wound. Here's what Jay Sawvell said, if you have any doubt who Wyoming's quarterback is going to be going forward.
I can tell you this. Evan Svoboda is going to be a really good quarterback at the University of Wyoming. He really is. Was he last Saturday night? No. Will he be this Saturday? I hope. All right, but there's going to come a time where we're all sitting there and we're all going to be really happy that he's the starting quarterback at Wyoming because of the skill set that he has, because of the talent that he has, and because of the investment and buy-in that he has. And what we've got to do is help that come along, and that means defensively play well, the other 10 people around him play well, all the way through it.
I love it. I love it. He said one day you're going to say, man, thankfully that's our quarterback. Thank God Evan Svoboda's our quarterback.
Yeah, and people also made comments like, why do you call timeouts at the end of the game, score a garbage touchdown? It's all about confidence. You got to do something right in a game where there was so much wrong. If they didn't have that last drive, they were going to end up with like 58 yards of total offense.
Yeah.
They had more penalty yards than total offense going into that last drive.
That was the other part, man. That was just so disheartening. That second drive definitely doesn't get the credit it's deserved of how that also embodied how this game went. I mean, they are moving. They're moving down the field. DJ Jones has a 15-yard run. Devin Body Jr. has a 12-yard catch. They're on the other side of the 50, and then all of a sudden, they have 4 guys lined up in the backfield. Then they have a false start on their center, their potential All-American center. Then it turns into a 3rd and long situation. Evan rips one that's just nowhere where it needs to be, and it's picked, and it's brought all the way back to almost the original line of scrimmage, which is now Wyoming's 32. And then Arizona State scores on 6 of their first 8 possessions. It would have been 8 of 8 if they didn't miss 2 field goals. I mean, it was that dominant, man. It went downhill in such a hurry. I questioned after the game, why did DJ Jones get so many carries? Where was Sam Scott? Where was Jamari Farrell? Sawvell said Farrell was dealing with a bit of an ankle. He also said DJ Jones is a better pass blocker. What does running have to do with pass blocking?
He did pick up the blitz several times that I don't know if those other guys would have.
But bring him in on running plays.
Yeah. Yep.
I don't get it. And then what does Sam Scott do? He comes in, he busts a 17-yarder, and then they score. And at the end there, once again, playing devil's advocate a little bit, I'm thinking, great. Do you want him to score here? Yes, because of what you said. No, because now the mouth breathers out there are going to say, is there a quarterback controversy? No. And guess what? Wyoming backups were in that game too.
Yeah.
The entire starting offensive line was backups. The entire wide receiving core was backups. Sam Scott was the running back. It was backups against backups. Did Caden Anderson do a bang-up job? Hell yes. He did a great job coming in. 0 pressure. 0, none, nada. He did what he was supposed to do.
That's why I still don't understand people spewing on social media that have no idea what they're talking about.
Oh, it's pain, man. I need to not read that stuff myself. But, DJ Jones was not effective, but his blocking wasn't effective. We learned that John Michael Gillenborg is going to be out for that game, right? Early that morning, heard about it. He's out. That helps absolutely no one. Because guess what? That first pass that was picked off by Nick Miles, it was heading toward John Michael Gillenborg. If he was in the game, it still would have been picked off.
But, to Evan's, defense, he had 2 of his security blankets out.
Yeah.
Harrison Whaley and John Michael Gillenborg. I mean, those are two guys that he is used to having from spring ball on, and even the games last year that he was in. Those were his security blankets, and then all of a sudden, they're gone.
Yeah. Well, now he lost his left tackle, Nate Geiger, who won the job out of camp. He is now on the shelf for an undetermined amount of time with a knee injury. Devon Harris goes down with an elbow. He's out for, who knows how long. And Isaac White sounds like he might not play in this game, so we might see Andrew Johnson getting his first start at safety.
The way that the Cowboys were dropping during that game, it reminded me a lot of Texas A&M back in the early 2000s, minus the broken legs. I think there was 2 broken legs in one of those games, if I'm not mistaken. One for sure. But just the way they kept dropping, I'm like, holy cow. And some of it at that point, too, when it's ugly, they're not going to tough certain things out because there's really no reason to. They got to get better for the next week and the next week.
Yeah, we also saw Tice Westland go down, and to me, Tice Westland had a hell of a ball game.
He did.
He had a whale of a ball game. He did well, and then Tyrekus Davis went down for a bit. There were a number of guys, and tell you what, another thing that really told the tale of this one is you remember Evan Svoboda running out on one of his only designed runs. He got hammered by I think that was a corner. It was a much smaller guy. Hammered Evan. Helmet came off, the whole 9. That was Arizona State all night long. They punched Wyoming right in the face, and they repeated one after another. Every Wyoming ball carrier had 4 or 5 guys on him. It was just Arizona State was beyond impressive, and Wyoming was hideous, and that's all there is to it.
If that's the 16th best or worst team in the Big 12, that league's definitely better than the SEC.
Big 12's going to be damn good. Yeah, no question. No question. So I talked to Casey Bramlett a little bit, of course, one of Wyoming's greatest quarterbacks ever. Asked him, his thoughts on Evan Svoboda, and he said, man, that first one just – the linebacker just jumped it. It was a pretty play, man. And it was. When you rewatched it, that guy was right in the spot.
It's almost like the only thing. Well, there's only a couple games they had game film on him anyway, but it's very similar to what that Texas out pass was.
Yeah.
Minus there was a linebacker versus a corner that picked it, but still, it just the way everything happened. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah. Rough start, man. But Casey Bramlett still, he likes what he sees from this kid. He likes his size. He likes his arm. He likes the way he said he kept, despite how bad it was, he said he always kept his head downfield, and he did.
I really thought that maybe after the second interception that you were going to see maybe Jaden Clemens come in and just say, Evan, if he takes us down and scores here, you're still going in the next series. No matter what happens here, you're going in the next series. I want you to stand here and watch from the sideline, take a couple deep breaths, take this in, and then you'll go back out there. I really thought maybe that was going to be the process, and it never happened.
Could have been, but I think another thing people are forgetting, instead they're saying fire the guy. That was Jay Sauvel's first time as a head coach. I mean, the worst case scenario, right? And maybe he just didn't think about that kind of stuff. Can you imagine what was going on inside that guy's head?
But really, it's not on him. Jay Johnson needs to be thinking about those things.
No doubt.
The wide receiver coach needs to be thinking about those things like, hey, should we do this?
No doubt.
Can we do this?
Yep. Well, I know it took 9 whole minutes for one fan to ask, can we have Craig Bohl back, please?
Well, speaking of Craig Bohl, he couldn't stomach it anymore. He left the stadium early in the third quarter.
Yeah.
I have photo evidence of it from a Wyoming fan who also left the game early. But Craig couldn't stomach watching his son get beat up anymore and his protege.
Yeah. Rough one, man. If you read the old message boards, it's time for Wyoming to drop down to the FCS. Fire Jay Sauvel, bench Evan Svoboda. The sun did come up on Sunday. I watched it from the Phoenix airport, unfortunately, but it did come up. So on the other side of the break, we might get into Idaho. I think we just had a lot of pent-up aggression this week when it came to the Sun Devils, and rightfully so. We will talk a little bit more about the Cowboys' defense and what happened in Tempe, Arizona. Welcome back to the 7220sports.com kickoff show, presented in part by Wyo Lotto. Win the pump, you win too. Learn more at wyolotto.com.
We have to understand how we win and how we have success. And that is, we've got to outwork our opponent. We got to be more physical than the opponent. And we better show up with brass knuckles and tire irons and everything else ready to fight. And the other night, to some of our older players, right? There's that message in there that, hey, you know what? You got a little bit of a wake-up call that we're not as good as what we need to be, particularly on defense. Like, we're not as good. That's going to be wake-up call. That was wake-up call number one. That was during the game. That's after the game. And that's going to be through the week this week. Like, there's some people that you better play a lot better. And, but we got to coach it better too. And I get that. But I think that to some degree, right, like, we have an expectation of being good on that side of the ball, and we fell short of that. And a lot of times, when you look at it, we weren't chasing the ball. And a lot of times it wasn't even we weren't getting off a block. But sometimes we weren't holding the gap the right way, or we didn't leverage a ball the right way, or we wouldn't finish in tackles off. And so those things, there's a lot in there that we control too, and we didn't control it well enough. And so we've got to do a much better job.
Jay Saville, Wyoming's old defensive coordinator, Jared Newland, not thrilled with the effort from that unit on Saturday night in Tempe, and I'm right there with him. It was rough.
I have a feeling that the entire coaching staff got an earful from Jay about the lack of effort, the lack of intensity, and it's like they've never been in a stadium larger than War Memorial before.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, it was loud, but it wasn't deafening.
Well, and people keep talking about the heat. I was on the field pregame. It was hot, but it wasn't what it could have been.
That cloud cover and wind that came up about an hour before the game saved.
Yeah. No doubt.
The heat.
It wasn't even that hot.
No. The sun was down at kickoff. It was not that hot.
Well, Arizona State was hot. 499 yards of total offense, 258 of those in the air, 241 of those on the ground. How's that for balance? They averaged 5 yards per carry, almost 12 yards per pass. Sam Levitt was really, really good. 14 of 22, 258 yards and 2 TDs. I would argue he was the difference maker with his feet. He made Cowboy defenders look downright silly. The over pursuit, the terrible angles, the hideous tackling. You could tell, even when a guy like Tyreek Davis is not a big man, but he'd get a guy and have to hold on for dear life and be getting dragged down the field a little bit until some buddies showed up. Arizona State showed up with bad intentions on both sides of the ball.
I was really surprised that they left Levitt in the game that long. I know it was his first collegiate start and everything, but he is not a big guy.
No.
He was one hit away from maybe not, being able to play this weekend, which this is obviously the next important game. That game was well in hand.
No doubt.
So I was kind of surprised on that. But, yeah, the lack of effort on defense as far as wrapping up and getting those guys to the ground was
troubling.
It was eye-opening because you haven't seen that. You see it from certain players, but not an entire team.
Not a guy like Shea Suino who's played so many games, and Isaac White and Wyatt Eckler and guys like that. And it's hard. I asked after the game, Jared, I said, it's a slippery slope, obviously, when you start questioning people's effort. I mean, they might have been given their all-out effort. You never know. But you mentioned it, and I mentioned that to Jordan Bernoulli, and he questioned his own effort. How is a 6-year senior who came back to hopefully play in the NFL questioning his effort in an opener at Arizona State University?
I just think sometimes when there's high expectations, I shouldn't say sometimes, most of the time, on a Wyoming team, they don't perform well. I think they just have so much because they're playing for an entire state.
Yeah.
It's unlike anywhere else, and I think they just have that added pressure to them, and they just need to, like you said, block out all the outside noise. Go play football.
Yeah.
I mean, and people are saying, well, do they even practice tackling in the off season? And I said, it's very obvious they hit a lot during preseason practices because there was a lot of injuries.
Yeah. And they're hitting as much as they can, I'm sure. I don't know, man. The best explanation I heard was from Dan Healy, our friend down in Colorado. He said this reminded him a lot of Super Bowl 48. In New York in MetLife Stadium. The ball goes over Manning's head, the first snap's over Manning's head, and the avalanche ensues, and that's what happened. throwing a pick six 41 seconds into this game, and they could not find their footing at all. We thought they had it offensively there on that second drive, and then it ends up being a pick. And then to make matters worse, Jared, when you're looking into some of these numbers, 3 for 13 on the night on third down, 2 of those happened on the final drive of the game. 65 yards worth of penalties on 7 flags. That doesn't happen. Wyoming Cowboys don't do stuff like that. And that was another eye-opener.
For the last 10 years, Wyoming's been one of the least penalized teams in college football.
Yeah.
And they've been really good at creating turnovers. They didn't even get a ball on the ground to even go after.
No, not even close. This offense through 3 quarters amassed just 56 yards. That's 9 yards less than penalty yardage. They crossed midfield only twice all day long. The troubling stat to me, Jared, was first down production. It was so bad. Through their first 16 first down snaps, they lost a yard. Lost 1 yard on 16 first down snaps. If you put yourself behind the chains like that, you're screwed. And you mentioned that last year. We were discussing before we came on the air, was the Boise State game last year in Boise worse than this one? In a lot of ways, yeah, and that all started with a 10-yard run by Harrison Whaley that's erased immediately by a holding call, and then nothing went right after that. However, Wyoming got a turnover on special teams in that game. John Michael Gillenborg scored. The defense played well at times. I'd argue the defense didn't play well at any time in this game. They finally held them to a punt, with a minute left in the third quarter?
It was so long ago, I can't remember.
We don't even want to remember. Well, and then you look, obviously the one thing a lot of Wyoming fans are talking about right now is today's opponent. The Idaho Vandals, an FCS team, lost a lot in the transfer portal in the offseason, but they didn't lose a lot on defense. They go into Eugene, Oregon against the number 3 Ducks, and they're down by 3 with just a few minutes to go in that one. They end up losing 24-14, but they gave Oregon all they could handle. So you look at that on its face and you go, uh-oh, here's a team in Idaho that, thinks they can be competing for an FCS national championship. They have to be feeling really good walking out of that game. Aside from Jack Lane, their starting quarterback, who suffered a broken collarbone, he is obviously going to miss a big chunk of this year. Jack Wagner, who will start against the Cowboys today, he came in, threw 2 passes. One of those was picked off at the very end of the game when the game was in hand anyhow. But they have to be feeling good.
They do, other than looking at the stat sheet against Oregon.
Oh, I mean, if you looked at the stats, you'd think this was an absolute beating.
First downs, Oregon 31, Idaho 10. Third down efficiency, 2 of 12 versus 7 of 16. Fourth down, 0 of 1 versus 1 of 3. Total yards, 217 to 487. You're looking at those and you're like, that score has got to be 47-3.
Exactly. Yeah.
To Idaho's credit, they scored 2 touchdowns, both on trick plays.
Yeah.
They scored 2 touchdowns. So
No doubt. And you got to do that against teams like Oregon when you're in Idaho.
Yeah. And Oregon, one thing is Oregon had 8 penalties for 60 yards, kind of similar to Wyoming, 7 for 65. And Idaho played a really clean game, 3 for 15.
Yeah.
2 turnovers cost them.
Yep.
Oregon only had 1 turnover. Time of possession, though, 39-15 to 20-45. That is what Wyoming football wants to do.
Yeah.
Balance attacks,
Yeah.
but time of possession.
Yeah, Dylan Gabriel, the new starting quarterback for the Ducks, 41 of 49 for 380 yards and 2 touchdowns. I looked at that stat first at the airport in Arizona and went, how did this happen? That kid's legit. You might remember him from Oklahoma. He's really good, and Central Florida. He's one of those new guys that has played for a new team seemingly every year.
3 teams in 3 years? Come on.
Here was a telling stat, though, for Idaho. 37 carries for the Ducks, 107 rushing yards. That's 2.9 a carry. That's really good. Only a long of 16 in that one from Jordan James. He rushed for 95 of those. Other than Jordan James, nobody did anything in that game. Dylan Gabriel, minus 23 yards in sacks. So Idaho's defensive front, they did plenty of damage. And you mentioned 1 for 3 on 4th down. They got them off the field on 4th down twice, and those were 4th and shorts. And they had a strip sack. They're very, this Jackson Eck, linebacker for Idaho, 9 tackles, tackle for loss. Keyshawn James Newby, he's a defensive lineman. He had 2.5 sacks in this game, or 2 sacks and another half a tackle for loss. Just really good. 3 sacks in this one, 6 tackles for loss. Idaho's defense is really, really good.
And that just goes to show you that Wyoming has got to come out early in this contest today, establish the run, establish the line of scrimmage. If they don't, this is going to be a long day.
Yeah.
And it's one that you're going to be on the edge of your seat until the fourth quarter. And we as fans don't want that to happen.
No.
But if they don't establish the line of scrimmage, it could be a long day for Wyoming.
Here's head coach Jay Sawvell and his thoughts on that Vandals D.
Their front four is really good. They're big, and they've got 2 really good defensive ends. And inside, it's number 5 and 52 and 96. The guys are physical, big guys. I mean, like I said, there's going to be, when you put the collective together, the entire 11, not only their front's disruptive and their front is big. When you put the collective 11 together, look, there's going to be multiple Mountain West defenses that we play week in, week out that I'm going to be able to sit there and I won't say it in here, but I'd be able to say it in other places. These guys aren't as good as Idaho's defense. Idaho's defense, this is a good defense.
They're good. They're really good. And, boy, wouldn't it be nice to face a terrible defense right now. Jay Sawvell mentioned numerous times that down the line here, they're going to play a bunch of Mountain West schools that aren't going to have a defense that's half as good as Idaho.
And here I was last week making fun of Air Force for playing Merrimack and teams like that. Can we insert Merrimack right now?
Yeah, what's it going to take to get a Stony Brook around here? It's a good game. Jared, what do you want to see most what is the number one thing you want to see from the Wyoming Cowboys today?
Get their confidence back, because they lost it all last week. They have to come out and, I just said it, establish the line of scrimmage and make sure that they know that they can dominate on the line of scrimmage. If they have any doubt on that, it's not going to go well for Wyoming today.
I think I would like to see old school Wyoming football, which we've been told has not been lost.
You mean student body right and student body left?
Yes. And I don't think people have said, what is this spread offense? I don't think we got to see what the offense even was. When you're not doing anything on first down, you're screwed. You're just behind the sticks all day long.
If you want to see anything of the offense, go to the second drive of the game.
Yeah.
And the last drive of the game.
Yeah.
Those are the only 2 drives you can take anything from.
No doubt. I want to see what we've been begging for a decade plus now. I want to see the power running game set up the pass. And I want to see I'm going to call a guy out. I want to see something from Alex Brown. I want to see something from Will Pellissier. Those are 2 guys that have been in this program forever. Didn't even hear their name called Saturday night. Non-existent. Were they being locked down? Why were they being locked down? Was there a call that could open something up so one of those guys can get a catch and get feeling good right away? I don't know. But those 2 have got to step up. They have to. John Michael Gillenborg, we don't know if he's playing. Hope so. I really hope so for this team, but we don't know if he's playing.
And from all reports, last week he wanted to play.
Yeah,
the coach has absolutely said, you are not playing.
Yeah. And that kind of shows that even though everybody's jumping off a bridge, including us a little, I would say this week.
There was one really close to the stadium.
There was. I'm shocked. There was actually water by the stadium.
It's their crew river.
Yeah. It did show, though, that if that was it was an important game, don't get me wrong, but if it was a huge must-have kind of thing, John Michael Gillenborg's playing in that game. That's one where you hope to win. Like we've said all along, you weren't going to fall out of our bar stool if Wyoming won that game. But that's one you hope to win, and if you don't, you just hope to come out of it feeling real good. Injuries, of course, you don't want, but you want to be feeling good. Like, hey, man, if 2 things would have gone our way, broke our way, we would have won that.
I wished I would have fell out of my bar stool after the game.
I wish I could have drank.
It took me an hour to get an Uber back to where I was staying.
It looked like it took about an hour to get a beer in that joint we were in the first place.
We were upstairs, and I honestly had 1 drink.
Really?
In the suite, yeah.
Was the suite free alcohol?
No.
Oh.
But it was just one of those situations where smacked in the face so fast, and I'm like, I don't want to. I'm going to feel good on the plane tomorrow, put it that way.
Yeah. I'll tell you, Arizona State's athletic administration, God bless them, they came down. The Wyoming, Alex Taylor from the Cheyenne and Laramie paper and I were the last one standing, and he came down and handed us some Yuenglings and said thanks for coming.
Yuenglings.
So,
good.
You know me, I don't drink anything.
One thing I do want to call the
Yuengling.
ASU SID office out on, though, did you look in their program at all?
No.
So there was a couple plays, and I'm like, who just caught that ball? That number's not familiar. And I couldn't see the names. Mm-hmm. So who cares if the names are on the back of the jerseys? I don't. But I'm flipping through the book real quick, and I look down, and I'm like, Tez Johnson. Never heard of the guy. And number 15, and I'm like, that's not. And then I look again. After the first 5 numbers, none of them were right. Because I looked up Nick Talich because his mom was in the box with us. I said, Nick's not even listed. And she goes, what? So we started looking. It was Oregon's roster from last year.
Weird.
After number 5. So the intern that was supposed to be cutting and pasting must have got on YouTube after the 5th number because he forgot to finish it.
Weird.
Yeah. So the roster was completely wrong other than the 5.
Wonder if they played Oregon last or something last year and it just got
I
stuck
don't know,
in the box.
or I don't know. It was...
I will say that you've been in that stadium before. I thought it was beautiful. I thought it was...
the renovations they made are great.
Yeah, the atmosphere was really cool.
I think they took out a total of 20,000 seats.
I could see that in that back end zone. Yeah, it was cool. It was, they really had some good glass on the press box. You couldn't hear very well, but it did sound like it was pretty rowdy. And I don't know, just the atmosphere was cool. I walked down on the field before I always do before the game, and the grass was, Jay Savell was right, it was a putting green. It really was.
Do you think the Cowboys were affected by the students chanting something to them when they came out on the field?
No. No,
you know what?
I don't.
Somebody said something to me about that. I can't believe they would use such profanity and things like that. I said, you're trying to tell me 2 weeks from now you're not going to be saying a certain chant at BYU? Yeah. Well, yeah, but that's different. No, it's not.
No, the only chants I heard were the Fire Jay Savell chants coming from some college-age Wyoming fans that were standing right behind the bench there at the end of the game when the entire ASU student body was already gone. Just a rough night at the office, Jared. Really, really rough night, and you really hope that's just an aberration and that's not what this is going to look like going forward. I feel like it's not. This team's too good. They're too talented. They're too old. They're old in a lot of right spots. They got sucker punched and they just couldn't rebound. And I know fans are looking for a better excuse than that, but every single person you've talked to has mentioned that we got punched in the face and we didn't respond. What else can you say?
Yeah, just take care of business today. Nobody will even remember the Arizona State game.
If you take it out on Idaho a little bit and then you beat BYU next week, nobody's going to remember this game, just like we don't really remember the Illinois game. When you think of Andrew Peasley, do you think of that night at Illinois, or do you think of a guy who stood in on an oncoming blitz and beat Texas Tech last year?
Yeah, I mean, the Illinois game, it was one of those things where at the time you were like, man, how did that happen? Was it the humidity? Was it the heat? Was it this? Was it that?
Yeah.
Even the following week, they beat Tulsa. It's like, oh, Illinois doesn't matter anymore.
If they don't beat Tulsa in that game, though, then I think we're kind of freaking out a little bit.
But remember what happened in that Tulsa game?
Yeah.
They aired it out.
No, they sure did.
And it wasn't just little dink and dunks.
Yeah, Josh Cobbs caught like a 65-yard touchdown pass in that game. Yeah, I remember Craig Bull getting emotional after he actually kind of squirted a tear behind the podium because he said that he told Josh Cobbs he loved him, and then Josh Cobbs promptly entered the transfer portal right after the season. So anyway, let's go with the rundown. The Mountain West had a really big opportunity last week, Jared, to make some hay. 6 games against Power 5 opponents. And wouldn't you know it, we all predicted it. UNLV would be carrying the banner for this conference, beating the crap out of Houston 27-7.
Wow, I thought Houston was better.
With a brand new quarterback. Went into the Bayou City and whipped them.
And good for Nevada to go on the road and get a win too.
Yeah, beat Troy.
And Air Force just hanging on to beat that Merrimack team.
I never saw the final score of that.
It was close really early, and then Air Force pulled away a little bit at the end.
Yeah.
So. But rundown of this week's games.
Yeah.
Utah Tech at UNLV just kicked off, or getting ready to kick off, excuse me. San Jose State at Air Force, the first Mountain West Conference game of the season. I like these early matchups like that every once in a while to sprinkle them in.
I watched San Jose State against Sacramento State. It was a really sloppy, ugly game. If they don't hold on to the ball, they're in big trouble in Colorado Springs.
Northern Colorado at CSU. Go Bears. Georgia Southern, the team that Boise State escaped,
yeah. Even with 6 Ashton Genty touchdowns.
And 297 or whatever it was on the ground.
Yeah.
They're at Nevada. That actually will be a really good game.
Well,
today.
Boise State's at Oregon.
Yep. No, I'm talking about Georgia Southern.
Oh, Georgia Southern.
Nevada.
I'm sorry. Yep.
Boise State at number 7, Oregon. Oregon, that's the only thing they lost last week was 4 spots in the polls.
Yeah.
But that doesn't matter anymore since there's 12 teams that make it to the playoffs, so they don't care about that.
They can gain that right back if they do what Washington did to Boise State last year.
Yep. And Boise State has not beat a top 15 or something like that opponent in like 11 tries, their last 11 tries, after being the monster beater all these years, and then now they just haven't won those games.
Well, in the Broncos' defense, they don't get a lot of those games at home, and that's going to be a tough task to go into Eugene.
Yep.
And Oregon's getting it from their fans this week too.
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to be motivated.
Sac State at Fresno State. Oregon State at San Diego State, which could be actually a really good game. San Diego State has a freshman quarterback playing.
Yep.
And you never know. They might actually have a decent crowd there since it's so late at night and the beach is closed. Utah State at USC. That's a 28.5-point spread. I say take the Trojans all day long there.
Yeah. I would agree. Wyoming, Idaho. I believe the last line I saw, 7.5-point favorite for the Cowboys. By the way, you better be wearing your gold today because it's supposed to be a gold out or gold rush or whatever they call it. So, big day for the Wyoming Cowboys. You can't emphasize it enough. You sometimes struggle with saying must win. This is a must win. Absolutely a must win. I have no problem saying that at all with BYU coming into town next week. You are feeling real bad if you don't beat an Idaho and FCS team in Laramie today. I think the Cowboys get it done. I think they get it done with balance. I think they run the ball. I think they're really going to run it instead of trying to run around like they did it at Arizona State for some reason, run at the teeth of Idaho. Punch them in the mouth, establish the line of scrimmage like you mentioned early. They got murdered on both lines of scrimmage last week in Tempe. Those guys, gut check time. And there's a lot of veteran guys on both sides of those lines. So I see the Cowboys really setting up the pass with the run in this game, and I also see the defense making a hell of a lot more plays. You heard that quote from Jay Sauvel. If some of these older guys don't step up, they're going to find themselves backups real quick.
Yep. What's your prediction of the score, though?
I think I said 13-3. I mean, you see where my confidence level's at.
Well, I agree with the low-scoring game. Definitely on the under for sure. I have Wyoming 24-10. That might be a little bit too high-scoring game, to be honest with you, because I think you're going to see that clock run a lot today, too.
Yeah.
And also want to give a shout-out to the 2004 Las Vegas Bowl championship team that's being honored today. It's 20 years.
What a great memory.
20 years.
It's crazy. It's crazy, but what a great memory. That's when you knew Wyoming football was finally turning the corner, and, man, it felt good. It felt good to beat UCLA that night. I will never forget freezing in the stands. It was one of the greatest nights of my life.
One of the coldest nights.
Freezing cold. Cowboys going to get it done today. 1:30 kickoff Mountain Time. Once again, the game is on True TV. You can also stream it on Max. This has been the 7220sports.com kickoff show presented by Wyo Lotto and Rocky Mountain Shirtworks. Thank you for joining us. For Jared Newland, I'm Cody Tucker. Stay tuned for Wyoming football next, right here on KOWB.